You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Lanterns authorization code accepted. Logging in. Your access to the HoloNet has been approved. Please stand by.
Good evening. Today is Thursday, August 3rd, in the year of our Lord 2017. I'm Matt Holloway, and you're listening to the HoloNet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. Coming up today, third-party problems, part 3.5. Yeah, we're going to go with that, 3.5 or 3.1, something like that. Either way, we have Gary Welch, National Communications Director for the Constitutional Party, who's going to join us for 30 minutes today, so make sure you set your alarm for this one. I think he's quite a bit more entertaining and a lot more fun to talk to than Daryl Castle's recorded interview was, but I'm going to take it easy on poor Daryl. We have a lot more to go through today as well. Special counsel Robert Mueller has impaneled a grand jury to investigate Russia's meddling in the 2016 election, according to the Wall Street Journal. We start there now on the HoloNet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. Stick around.
Has imposed upon the patriotic people of this country a responsibility and a duty greater than that of any since the Civil War.
It is the common people of the world that are interested in this business. They know when we have war, it is they that have to bear the burden. It's their sisters and mothers and daughters that have to wait, trembling, to hear the news.
We are called as a people to give testimony in the sight of the world to our faith that the future shall belong to the free. Since this century's beginning, a time of tempest has seemed to come upon the continents of the earth.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice. And let me remind you also that moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue.
I want the people of America to be able to work less for the government and more for themselves. I want them to have the rewards of their own industry. This is the chief meaning of freedom. Until we can reestablish a condition under which the earnings of the people can be kept by the people, we are bound to suffer a very severe and distinct curtailment of our liberty.
You're listening to the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. The new conservative resistance begins right here, right now.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The millennial conservative resistance begins here.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Matt Holloway. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. Oh man, what a day, what a show we've got lined up for you today. News coming in just as I sit down to do the podcast. Special Counsel Robert Mueller, I keep saying Mueller, has impaneled a grand jury to investigate Russia's meddling into the 2016 election, the Wall Street Journal has reported. Now, I'm picking it up on the Fox News stream because I always bounce between a couple of different sources. Fox is one of them. But according to Fox, the move is seen as a sign the investigation into election interference and possible collusion with the Trump campaign is heating up and entering a new phase. We go to Reuters. Now, Reuters has indicated that grand jury subpoenas have been issued in connection with the June 2016 meeting that included President Trump's his son-in-law, and the Russian lawyer. Two sources have told Reuters on Thursday in a sign that Special Counsel Mueller's investigation is gathering pace. So what does this all mean? Does that mean that after all of this hemming and hawing, that there's absolutely nothing to see here, folks, move along, that there actually might be some meat on the bone? Could there be some indication of malfeasance by these individual parties, if not by the Trump campaign as a whole? I honestly don't think that the Trump campaign as a whole conspired to collude with the Russian Federation or the government of Russia at any point. But I do think that there are more hands in here than anybody really wants to admit, especially with the recent revelation that President Trump essentially dictated his son's response to the growing allegations against him, which, take as you will, leads back to my prior point that the White House and the president need to distance themselves from this scandal. This is why having family in the business is a bad plan. Because when you have family in the business, it makes it so much harder to disengage when the business calls for it. Because were this any other person, I think, than the president's son, any political analyst would be screaming, cut and run, cut and run. Now, so far, a spokesman for the special counsel has declined to comment. But for those of you unfamiliar with our legal system, a grand jury is a group of ordinary people, your peers, working behind closed doors who consider the evidence of a potential criminal wrongdoing, and then the prosecutor can decide whether charges should be brought. The grand jury decides whether charges are justified. So here's the big $50 million question. Why do you impanel a grand jury? Because you believe that there are charges to be pressed. There is no lawyer in this country who will go before a grand jury without strong evidence in hand. So there's something. Does it lead back to President Trump per se in a direct quid pro quo that's provable? I don't know. I can't say. But there's something there to implicate someone. The question is, how far up do the ties go? How far up does the awareness go? Or will those 12 ordinary people decide, move along, there's nothing to see here? Either way, chalk this one up to another lousy day to be in the Trump administration. While Special Counsel Mueller is impaneling his grand jury, there are other news stories that are liable to give you some indigestion. Last week, Scaramouche will no longer be doing the fandango in the White House. That's right, Mr. Scaramucci was removed from his position as communications director of the White House. And that was right after I put out my show last week. Oh, I was kicking myself. I said if I could have held out for a little longer, just a little longer, I could have filled an hour with just Scaramucci jokes. But we stayed above that, and I think the mainstream media actually did a pretty good job making him look absolutely god-awful. But I'm not going to jump on that dog pile right now. What is alarming to me, and should be alarming to you, is that the Trump campaign seems to have a slight problem with turnover. Now, in my line of work, I work in a call center. Attrition is a big deal. We always need to monitor attrition to make sure that we're getting our best investment out of the people that we hire, and that it's a positive growth experience for them as well. That it's good all around. It just makes good business sense. You don't want too much attrition. At the same time, you don't want too little. You don't want to stagnate. You want people to grow and to move up and there to be an influx of new people. But in a White House, it's very unusual to see this amount of turnover in a cabinet inside a 6-month frame of time. It's even stranger to see these back to back to back. Sean Spicer, Scaramucci. Now it looks as though we may be shopping for a new Attorney General and possibly a new Secretary of State. This should be unsettling to you. Because if the White House can't seem to keep even the most basic cabinet positions staffed, let alone getting people through nomination and getting people approved by Congress, but just keeping them staffed, that's off-putting. That tells me there's something wrong at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. I'm thinking of putting my resume in. Maybe I've got a shot. Seems to be a revolving door anyhow. I've seen longer tenures at McDonald's. Anyhow, we have a really fascinating interview lined up for you. We're joined on the program today by Mr. Gary Welch, who's the National Director of Communications at the Constitution Party. Now, Gary reached out to me, the national chairman of the Constitution Party, Mr. Flukiger, I'm still screwing that up. I'm so sorry, sir. But yeah, Mr. Flukiger reached out to me as well, and we also had contact with our chairman for the state of Arizona, Mr. Kent Miller. Kent was good enough to reach out to me by phone. I think he got to me first. Kent Miller got me first. Then Mr. Flukiger, the national chairman, and then the gentleman we're about to speak with, Mr. Gary Welch. Now, Gary has got a couple surprises in store for us, and I know we're probably going to talk a little bit about my comments pertaining to the Castle campaign, but we're really going to dig into what the Constitution Party's goals are for 2018 and 2020 and where they sit in the grand spectrum of American politics. So we're going to go to Mr. Gary Welch right after this break. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. Stick around.
America molested by Ronald McDonald. It's true. Has it happened to you? Starts with a dime and ends with a dollar. Makes me wanna get up and holler. Hey, what hasn't happened to you? 'Cause it's happening all around, and no one's making a sound about it. We gotta take back America, 1, 2, 3. Take back America, you and me. Take back America, or we're all screwed.
Here at the New Conservative Resistance, we understand if you don't get enough of the HoloNet. So, we've made it easy for you. To find the latest on Matt Holloway, whether it be blogs or radio podcasts, go to theholonet.com or holonet.lanterns.buzz.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The Millennial Conservative Resistance begins here.
And welcome back. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. I'm Matt Holloway. Joining me this segment, we finally got him. We got him to come on board. We have with us from the Constitution Party, Mr. Gary Welch, who I believe you're titled Communications Director, are you not, Gary?
Yep, the official title is National Communications Director, and that's because they wouldn't accept my version of a title that I want, which was the Minister of Subversive Propaganda.
Awesome. The Constitution Party, now a wholly owned subsidiary of Pravda. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I know I made a little bit of a project and a bit of a point of bringing on the Constitution Party because when I was in my contributing days at The Blaze, I wrote an article about the Libertarian Party, and a lot of people actually gave me, in the comments below that, which there are about 100, 150, and many of them are calling me things I can't repeat on air, but in the comments, a lot of people advised me to look to the Constitution Party because I am, by definition and by writ, a constitutional conservative. I title myself the Millennial Constitutional Conservative. So they've told me in droves that this is the party that I need to look into and that I need to pay the most attention to. So I wanted to make sure that I gave the Constitution Party an opportunity to be represented for our third party politics series. So I'm really glad that you came on, and I wanted to kind of open the floor to you to talk to us about the Constitution Party, about the future of the party, and where you see the party fitting in 2018 and 2020.
So thank you for having me on, and this is actually a really good opportunity for me because we are looking at the millennials. When I first started in this position, one of the things we talked about was the millennial vote. And everybody has dismissed the millennials. They're just like, oh, they don't vote. They don't want to participate. And I've always stated that the millennials are probably the smartest people around when it comes to politics because the rest of us, we've gone to this trough of manure. We go out there and we look at it and we go, oh, that smells awful. Oh, this is terrible. I really don't want to eat this. And then we go, we just dig right in. Then we go, oh, that was terrible. Oh, I hate this. And then 2 minutes later, we're back right at it again. Or 4 years later, we go right back to the same old trough and eating it. And what I said is the millennials have just figured it out and just said, you know what, guys, we don't want to participate in that. If all you're going to do is just take the same old garbage that they're passing out over and over again and just consume it and say, yeah, we hate it, but we're going to do it, we'd rather not participate. So we've designed the party to kind of put out the principles for trying to reach out to millennials and say, okay, guys, we do have a reason for you now to participate because you're getting at that age where the millennials are starting to look at that and saying, hey, I'm going to get stuck with this mess. The rest of you guys that are making it, you're going to be checking out when this all comes collapsing down, and I'm going to be the person stuck with that. And as they're figuring this out, they're starting to become politically active, and we're definitely reaching out to them.
Yeah, our generation is getting into the 30s now. So you're seeing millennials beginning to settle down, a lot of us, starting to build families, get involved in our careers. And I look to, and this might be giving my generation a little bit too much credit because the whole country voted for him, but I look at the election of Barack Obama as like the last scream of millennial adolescence. I mean, that's the first major presidential election when most of people my age graduated high school.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was pretty lucky. I actually got to vote for George Bush once. George W. Bush.
We'll forget you.
Not that the options were that great that year.
Yes.
It was that or John Kerry, and I stand by my decision. But
millennials... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, in light of it, there are also, the younger batch of millennials, and their first presidential election was voting for Barack Obama, and then they went and did it again. So now we're seeing more and more millennials take a good hard look in the mirror and say, okay, for the last 8 years, or for the last 12 years, we now own a part of that, because it was really easy to piss, moan, and complain about President George W. Bush. We didn't put him in office. So it was really easy just to pin that on our parents and on our grandparents and just whine and carry on. But when it comes to President Barack Obama's administration, we own that. As he loved to say, he said, you didn't build that. Well, we did build that. We built 8 years of Barack Obama, and we have to now grip the mirror and realize we, in part, are now building the Trump administration as well. And so far, many of us don't really like the way it looks. So we're reaching a crossroads now of what nation do we want to build? And we're reaching that same point that every generation before us has of what nation do we want to hand down to our children, because a lot of us are starting to have kids now. I've got 3 little ones at home. And that is my chief concern, is what nation will I hand to those 3 little boys?
And change always comes through the younger generation. And that was why I think, Barack Obama was part of your legacy, was this change. Donald Trump is part of it. It is just that we're tired of the status quo. We do not, the younger generation always challenges the older one and says, we're not going to accept your standards, your reasons, your candidates, your policies. We're going to make our own. And it's that challenge that I always feel is good. That's the little revolution that this country always needs, to sit there and challenge that status quo and say, you know what, I think you guys are going in the wrong direction and we need to change direction. The older folks my age, I'm in my late 50s. We tend to be kind of stuck in our ways, and we're very resistant to change. And it's the youth of the nation that always stands up, and this has always been the case, and says, hey, it's time to do something different. In this case, though, you guys are really facing a need to change. The consequences of your failure to change things in American politics is going to end up in a very, very bad place for you when you reach my age.
I honestly speak to people who are in my age group and younger, and I speak in the terms that we talk about entitlement. Does anybody actually believe that Social Security is going to be there when we retire? I'll tell you, Gary, I don't believe it's going to be there when you retire. And you're about 20 years down that road closer than I am. But no one does. Anyone who believes in this fairy tale, I've got a bridge in northern Arizona I'd like to sell you.
Yeah, we see that all over. It's one of the things that I notice that we are going through, and it's part of the times, it's part of what we're dealing with. But there is this pessimism, and this is not just with the millennials, it's all throughout the United States. We have this pessimism of this is not going well, this is not going good, this is not the country of opportunity, these are not the things that we want in life. And I always say that pessimism comes out of tyranny. When you are oppressed, and I don't mean oppressive like communist Nazi oppression, but just simply you are oppressed. Your government regulates. They want to tell you what to eat. They want to tell you what to think, what to say. Everything you do, they want to control your life. And that does give you a emotional response of being pessimistic and depressed, because it's like, man, these guys are just controlling everything. When you have true freedom, that's when you're the happiest. That was what this country was built on. It was really designed to create happiness, the most happiness for people. And we've enjoyed this for a very, very long time, but it's been also now going backwards to the point where there is a lot of pessimism. And one of the things we want to introduce in the Constitution Party is this optimism. We have a message of hope. We have good news for everybody to say, hey, there is a way out of this. There's a good future for you if you want to take it.
We just have to get back to the original building blocks that made this country what it is. And one thing I've noticed is that in the past two presidential elections, much of the country seems to have developed a massive chip on their shoulder. Be they left, be they right, and the pendulum is swinging wildly. I mean, this would be a good place to drop in the song, I Don't Know Why I Go to Extremes If I Think I Can Do It Without Getting Sued. Because we went from the near socialism of the Obama administration to now this near autocratic corporate state with President Trump. And it seems to be a random bag when it comes to foreign relations. We have more scandals than I think anybody dreamt of even 15, 20 years ago, any one of which could pop off and effectively end the presidency where it sits, and we could wind up with President Pence. So, what is the Constitution Party's antidote to this state?
Well, it's all in the name. It's the Constitution. That document is a contract between the people and the government, and it regulates what the government can do. It doesn't say, here are the minimum things that the government can do. It says this is the maximum you can do. And it was designed in purpose because the people that wrote that were sitting in a government that was pretty close. Well, actually, I think we're actually a little bit more tyrannical than they were. So they were going from experience. They said, here's the things we dealt with, and here's how we can prevent this from happening again. So it's just a matter of going back to the contract, putting the contract in effect and abiding by it, and telling government, yes, this is the document that you're going to go by, and this is our relationship with you. We definitely have gotten far away from that. And I tell everybody, the Democrats and the Republicans are socialists. They're both, and what I call socialists is big government people. They believe that government is the solution for everything. The only difference is Republicans want a big conservative government, and the Democrats want a big liberal government, but they both want big government.
Flip sides of the same coin, and it goes back to a lot of what Glenn Beck has said over the years, a lot of what the Blaze said, and Rush Limbaugh and Hannity, that there are progressives on both sides that both feel that large government is okay as long as it does what they want it to. Meanwhile, there are so very few people that are realistically calling for a small government solution. So we got a couple minutes left here before we go to our first break, because I absolutely have to have you guys for a half an hour, because I did the same for our libertarian friends and our federalist friends. So I think it would only be even. But before we do go to that quick break, Article 5. Where does the Constitution Party stand with an initiation of an Article 5 convention?
Absolutely, positively, definitely, 100% against it.
100% against. Now, a lot of our listeners on Lanterns are very strongly pro Article 5, so I think this is something we can really sink our teeth into after we get back from the break. And also, we're going to make sure we give a little bit of time to address the less than praiseworthy commentary I had for Mr. Darrell Castle, and I really do hope he was a good sport about my commentary to his energy and to his ability to attract a listening crowd. But we're going to get to that real fast here as soon as we come back from this break. Again, thank you so much for joining me here on the program, and stay with me, Gary. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The millennial conservative resistance begins here.
And we're back. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. And still with me here from the Constitution Party, we have Mr. Gary Welch, who's the National Director of Communications for the Constitution Party. Now, right before the break, I asked two questions to kind of lead us into the second segment that we have here. The first was, where does the Constitution Party stand on Article 5 and an Article 5 convention? And the second we'll get to in a little bit was referring to my commentary on the Castle campaign in 2016. But I really want to dive into this Article 5 thing because I'm a little bit of a black sheep here at the Lanterns Media Network, which makes complete and total sense because I'm a millennial on a conservative network. But Article 5 tends to be supported by an awful lot of the grassroots conservative groups that are out there. And before the break, Gary, you told me that the Constitution Party is 100% dead set against a constitutional convention along the lines of Article 5. And I want you to expand on that, if you could.
Well, I could actually take a whole hour on doing it, but the main things that we have is, one, the document itself is fine. Everything in there, if you just went back to the original contract, do what it says, you're going to be fine. You will have the perfect government. That was the way it was designed to be. So we go with that. Second is, if they're not obeying the original contract, what in the world makes you think that they're going to obey the second one? And then the third one is, once you open that door, you have no control. You've got to read that Article 5 carefully. And what it says is, once that convention is started, it's out of your hands. You no longer have control over what they can do and what they can say. The original, the very first Constitutional Convention was sent to revise the Articles of Confederation. And they got there and they said, nope, we're scrapping it and we're starting something new. There's nothing stopping them from doing that exact same thing. And the government that you will get out of that could be a whole lot worse. Why is guys like George Soros supporting that Article 5 Convention? When you got to ask yourself, what's in it for him? Why would he want to make a government that is less as big as it is and less intrusive into our lives? There's some, the bottom line is, do you trust politicians? Do you trust them? Because that's what you're going to do. You're going to say, yes, we're going to trust you guys to do the right thing. They haven't done it yet. They haven't kept their promises yet. They lie to your face every day openly now. You're just opening this thing up to where they can destroy a very, very good contract that we have.
So a question for you now along those lines. Short of engaging an Article 5 convention, what is a workable solution to enforce term limitations on Congress?
Vote them out. You don't need term limits. The problem that we have is we don't understand the power that we have. We've gotten to the point, and I talk about this a lot. We have had at least 70 years of indoctrination from the time you went to school to what you watched on TV to what the politicians told you that says the power is with the government. If you want something, ask government. We'll give it to you. If you need something, government will give it to you. If you have a problem, you take it to government. If you need solutions, you go to government. And so we've gotten to thinking that they have the power. They don't. We do. It is in the people. We have the power to change government. We could have a totally new government and how it looks and feels and talks and does its actions simply by voting in the right people and voting people out. Term limits are not going to solve anything. All it is going to replace liar A with liar B.
So more of a vote out incumbents route than an Article 5 route.
Well, voting in people that understand their role to start with. This is one of the things that makes up what we call the first pillar of the Constitution Party is our candidates are going to understand their role. That role is, one, I am a public servant. I am an employee of the people of the United States. They are my employers. I'm not their ruler. I am not their lord and master. I am their employee. And then the second one is I am doing it like the original founding fathers. I'm doing this because it's my civic duty to do so, just like serving in the military or being a policeman or a fireman or something like that. I'm going in there. I'm going to do something for my community, and then I'm going to go right back and live with the rules that I made. Having those attitudes and those type of candidates will do a lot more and will be a lot better overall in so many different things, is a better solution than just saying doing term limits. Term limits is not as good as people think about. There's a gentleman named Scott Bradley, Dr. Scott Bradley. Look him up. He does a thing, I think his website's called Preserve the Nation. He talks about term limits, and he talks about Article 5 quite a bit. He's a constitutional scholar. And one of the things he talks about in term limits is when you put a senator and you give him term limits, all you're doing is saying your last election, your last term of office, that second one, is 6 years of mischief because you're free to run. You're free to do whatever you want. You're not going to get reelected. So do whatever you want to do. That's a very dangerous thing in government.
Nothing more dangerous than someone who has nothing to lose.
Yeah. So we're looking at the wrong thing. It's the character of the candidates that should be the criteria of what we're looking at.
All right. Now, two more things that I wanted to get to before we part ways. I did want to, again, see if there was any reaction to what I had to say about the Castle campaign, and if you think I judged it too harshly. And then I think we'll follow it up with really the vision for 2018 and 2020 in the Constitution Party and what we can expect and what we can look for.
Yeah, so Daryl actually is a great person when you meet him in person and talk to him just on a one-on-one. He's from Tennessee. He's a much older gentleman, and so he comes from that Southern statesman style. So the podcast that you read, I would agree with you. It was kind of on the dry side, but that's just the style of the politics that he grew up with. Very statesman, very eloquent, and very thoughtful in the approach. But once you get him kind of off and out of that mode, he's really a good guy. But I always say it's not how he says it. And I get it. I understood exactly what you were saying. Your message, the way you deliver your message is important. But when you sit down and say, okay, I'm going to disregard how he's saying it and actually listen to what he's saying, the things he said was profound. And I'll tell you right now.
He's on the money.
Yeah. A Darrell Castle presidency, he would have been, I guess for millennials, he would have been considered boring, but he would have been the greatest president we ever had because the things he would have done would have been everything that those of us that call ourselves conservatives would have been hoping for. Instead of getting this, hey, I'm going to do all these things, and then as soon as you get in office, they say, well, we're going to do this instead. You would have actually got somebody that would have carried out the duties of the president like it's supposed to be. So
one of my most favorite presidents of all time was Calvin Coolidge. And Calvin Coolidge was considered as dull as a can of paint to most of the Washington socialites and the would-be in crowd of that day. They called him Silent Cal, and they thought he was a god-awful bore. But still, he was one of the greatest conservative presidents, one of the most conservative presidents that we ever had, more enforced by the fact that this is a man who looked at the construction of Mount Rushmore and was absolutely aghast at the deification of the presidency and decided to walk away from what would have very likely been another win for him. But he decided he had to step away because he felt that it was a poison. And I think that Darrell Castle, for all the smack I like to talk about how non-energetic he was and how I felt his voice was drowned out in this past electoral cycle, I do agree that the substance is solid. The things that he has to say and the principles that it's coming from are all solid constitutional principles that I think we need to restore. But being pragmatic, I do have to say that if you're not able to deliver it in an intention-getting form, then you're not going to get anywhere in a national election.
I'm going to encourage you to listen to a gentleman named Matt Riccardi. He's running for governor of New Jersey on the Constitution Party ticket. The website's www.r4nj.org. Listen to him. He's a young millennial. He's 30 years old. And I think you're going to like his style a lot better. I think he's a little more energetic than Daryl is. So give him a listen and watch how he does things. But he's still coming off of the same Constitution Party principles. And one of the things that came out of the Daryl Castle campaign was we realized we have to change our message. We had a good principles. We have good solid foundation of what we're working with, but the way we delivered our message just wasn't resonating with the American people. So that's why the 3 pillars came out. That was the whole purpose of this, is getting a message out that would resonate with the American people and get them motivated so that they're going to say, okay, we finally had enough of the GOP and they don't represent conservatives. Now this party does, and we want to join them and we want to participate with them. And more importantly, we want to fight with them.
I think that one of the best examples that I ever saw was somebody holding up a copy of the Constitution. And I have my copy of the Constitution, which was given to my grandfather when he graduated from elementary school in Guttenberg, New Jersey in 1940. I think it was 1940. I have to check the date on the thing. But it's a very old copy of the Constitution. It also has a copy of the Constitution of New Jersey. So definitely check on the gubernatorial candidate for New Jersey from the Constitution Party. What was his name one more time?
Matt Riccardi. R-I-C-C-A-R-D-I.
Matt Riccardi running for governor. We'll have to touch base with Mr. Riccardi's people and see if we can possibly talk to him as well, because that's got my attention. I mean, I grew up there. But somebody held up a thin copy of the Constitution and said, these are the rules that the American people use to bind the government and that the government has to obey. And then they'd take a radical zoom out to stacks upon stacks of legal books and paperwork and everything that Columbia law has to offer and says, these are the rules that the government makes you abide by. Now, realize the fact that they won't even abide by this. But they expect you to abide by this. And it was a real eye-opener for me. And I don't know who put it up or who had it. I saw this like 10 years ago. And it was an eye-opening experience for me that the contract is badly out of balance. Is the government expects me to follow so many laws and so many statutes that the average American, I believe it was, commits 3 felonies a day without realizing it.
Yeah.
But the government won't even stick to a simple agreement that our founding fathers set up. So, pivoting from that, and pivoting from Mr. Riccardi running for governor in New Jersey, what else is on deck for the Constitution Party at this stage of the game? Are you on the ballot in all 50 states? Do you anticipate to be by the time 2020 comes around?
No, we are not on the ballot. Even though we're the 5th largest party in the country, we're still very, very small when it comes to third parties. But the approach we're taking is we're using this 3 pillars, this idea of restoring honesty, integrity, and accountability in government. And what we decided to do is we're taking it grassroots. We're going down to the communities because our whole party is even built on this. We're built on that local government is the best government. And so what we're going to do is we're going to build it by county. But in saying that, we still feel, just because of the mood of the people and everything, that we will have significant growth by 2018, and by 2020, we're ready to run. We will be in all 50 states. We're ready to go, and we're going to start making an impact. I am not a big fan of the presidential election. To me, it's just a beauty race. If we're in 40 states where we control the state legislatures in 40 states, as far as I'm concerned, we're in control, and we'll have everything that we will need to get our philosophies and our constitutional values out. So I'm not a big thing of who's going to be our next president. I always look at what states are we going to have where we have the majorities in those states, because that's where the real action is going to occur.
And in a truly constitutional government, the state houses are truly seats of power once again, as they haven't been for over a century. More of that power will be ripped back from Washington, D.C., and put closer to the people, where it belonged in the first place, wouldn't you say?
Yes, and that's the philosophy, is kind of like where the Civil War, where the southern states went wrong. They had the right intention of this nullification of the federal government, that we have our state rights and we are paramount. You know, it goes with the people, the state, then the federal government. That was the design of it. But, you know, the idiots, and there was kind of idiots on both sides, decided to put bullets involved when they really didn't have to. All you had to do was just simply say, you know what? We're going to ignore you. We're going to do things our way and the way we want to do it. And they could have avoided everything. But it's kind of in that same attitude. If we can get states to realize their power and the people to realize their power, you can definitely hinder the federal government all on your own. And that's where we have to put it. We have to put it back in there. And you start by changing your community, changing your county, changing your state. Then, you know, we can get to the federal government whenever we want to. And it'll kind of change on its own anyways, just simply because the power shift will have already occurred.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Gary, for giving us some insight into the Constitution Party. Now, if people want to get involved, if they want to find out more, where can they go?
It's www.constitutionparty.com. And then my address, it's on the website, but if you do contact CP at constitutionparty.com, and just go there. That's actually my address. It comes to me, and I'll be more than happy to answer questions and tell you what's going on. We're always, though, a big state party. All of our focus, the power and everything in the party is just like the country we want to form. The power resides with the states. So always contact your state organization, because that's where it's at.
I was already in touch with our Arizona chairman. I know it was very funny. The day that I recorded our last episode for Third Party Problems, I got calls from yourself, I got calls from the national chairman, and I got calls from the Arizona chairman within an hour of each other. And I said, gosh, did they get together?
Yeah.
But
it took a little while, but we got.
I'm so glad that you did. I thank you so much for joining us, Gary, and for giving us some of your time and some more to think about in the world of third parties. It's really a comfort to know that these steps forward that are going to be so crucial are beginning to take place, because I do see the coming collapse of the dialectic. And I mentioned in earlier episodes that I do believe we are moving toward an era of more state-driven politics and more coalition politics, because the people are discovering very quickly that the emperors on either side have no clothes, and that the devil you know is no better than the devil you don't. So I think that's where we're going to find ourselves in 2018 and 2020, and I believe the Democrat and Republican parties need to be put on notice. So, once again, folks, that was constitutionparty.com, I believe?
Yes, it is.
constitutionparty.com, and we've been speaking with Gary Welch, who's the National Director of Communications for the Constitution Party. Thank you so much for joining us, Gary. When we come back, we're going to do our wrap-up for the week, and we're going to touch on what's trending on Twitter, and also recent news events here in Phoenix, such as the firebombing of the 4th Avenue Jail. That's right, we're seeing a little taste of anarchy here in Phoenix, Arizona. All that and more when we come back from this quick break. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The millennial conservative resistance begins here.
Wow. You know, this is like the 5th or 6th time this has happened to me, but I get a really great interview going, and I frickin' run out of show. I mean, I've got like 4 minutes left. Seriously. Because I gotta make this thing 54-59. 54-59, 54-59. It's kind of like that Billy Joel song, you know? If you want to be a hit, you gotta make it fit, so they cut it down to 3:05. Alright, yeah, unless you know Billy Joel, you're not gonna get that. It's from the song The Entertainer. It's off of Songs in the Attic, I think. Anyway. But, yeah, I'm out of time, and here I am rambling on about Billy Joel. So, what I want to talk to you about, Phoenix 4th Avenue Jail. You can check out the story on theholonet.com. You can also check it out on lanterns.buzz. Phoenix Jail firebombed, law enforcement on high alert. So in the early morning hours of August 1st at about 2 a.m. and then again at 7 p.m., 3 Molotov cocktails, which are glass bottles filled with a flammable liquid, usually with some kind of paper or rag sticking out of the top. You light it on fire, chuck it, and boom, boom. Instant firebomb. 3 of those bad boys were chucked at the 4th Avenue Maricopa County Sheriff's Office Detention Center, setting an entryway and the sidewalk on fire. This is not a small prison complex either, or a small jail. 1,700 detainees are there. This is the main, like clearinghouse jail for Maricopa County, which is the largest county in Arizona. It comprises like Phoenix and the whole valley. So this is where your detainees wind up from various cities, from all the county. The state detainees wind up there. And obviously people who are waiting for immigration transport, who are waiting to be handed off to ICE. So 1,700 people housed there. So yesterday, Sheriff Paul Penzone gets on with the press on Facebook Live, and it's all up there in the story, and he says, quite frankly, this is an attack on law enforcement and the law enforcement community. It is an attack on the community at large, and he comes just short of calling this a terrorist attack. He said, I think it's an act of terrorism in a manner that it's an attack on individuals who work in this building, and that the method that he used was extremely dangerous and aggressive. But I'm not going to frame that in the framework of something that we see on a more global scale. Now, your really special individual who did this and then promptly surrendered the following morning was 27-year-old Michael Anthony Areola of Mesa, Arizona. So they arrested him with very little effort, and he pretty much got to everything. Now, this is a guy who's been a frequent stayer at this, a frequent guest at this little hotel, if you will. But, yeah, not a good guy. But here's what concerned me greatly about this kind of attack. It is brazen. I mean, okay, throwing cocktails at the wall at 2 o'clock in the morning, that's one thing. 7 p.m.? In downtown Phoenix? I mean, all the surveillance shots of this really do reveal you're gonna get caught. I mean, I don't know what this guy's motives are. It doesn't really matter. But it puts you off a little bit to see firebombs in the street of the 5th largest city in the United States. I mean, think about it. Put this into the context of Ferguson. Put this in the context of the Dallas shootings. Put this into the context of Occupy Wall Street and the Occupy movement in California, out in Compton, and the rioting that we saw in Seattle, Tacoma, and Portland. Put it all in that same context. And what are we heading toward in this country? And what is the way back to us actually living in a free nation where we don't have to be concerned for our safety? The way back is to get everyone to the table again. And remember that it's okay to disagree and to value those disagreements. I'll leave you with that for tonight. Thank you for listening to the HoloNet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. If you want, you can find us online at theholonet.com, theholonet.lanterns.buzz, facebook.com/holonet. Follow on Twitter at Matt D. Holloway or at The HoloNet. Thank you, good night, and God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. From Phoenix, Arizona, I'm Matt Holloway.